All right, so hopefully you can see me live now. I'm just trying to use the screen and the laptop and the phone as well. So I think we were pretty much there. And good, let me just do that. So I've been getting a lot of questions from people who are building businesses and also those who are involved in sales as well. I'm just going to set out my microphone here. And the problem a lot of people have is that they have their targets, but there's no understanding of the technique that's necessary to actually hit the targets. There's a really important way in which you should approach this. So what we're going to look at today is a technique that, or kind of an approach to sales targets that I've used for over 10 years now. Just to give you a bit of background, so I've worked with sales in the sense of building teams, selling products myself, online, in person, over the phone as well. I've done that for almost 15 years now. And well over 10 years ago, I started managing sales teams and, you know, I was building teams of people and of course then I was assigned targets in order to bring in revenue every single day, week, month, quarter and year. Now with that happening, what you tend to find is there's some things that you start realizing across, for instance, a sales month. And there's a really simple technique. So what we're going to focus on today is the real basics of what needs to be done to make sure you're hitting your sales target. Okay, so what we're going to do is start with an understanding, but we're going to focus on a case study. So imagine that you have $10,000 as a monthly, it's not much, but as a monthly sales target for yourself or your team or whatever. Now the premise here is really, really simple, but there are two key things we're going to be doing. So we're going to understand how to work monthly and weekly. For those of you who are involved with, I'm just checking that anyone's watching, yeah, that's fine. For those of you who are involved with building businesses, so starting out, you should be looking to set yourself an objective financially in terms of sales right off the bat. It also should be a structured approach too. Even if your business feels fairly nebulous, you're just starting things out, it's important to make sure you have things like this, this kind of structure in place. Now, I'm just going to move the camera up so you can see me okay. Now, one thing that I was told very early on by a professor who's also the Dean of London Business School, a guy called Sir Andrew Leicherman, was that you need early on in a startup to have goals, objectives and milestones, and that includes revenues as well. So I suppose what I'm saying is it's a mistake to start a business and say what we'll do is we'll just see how it goes. What we'll do is we'll try and generate some business and see how that goes. Okay, so what I want to focus on is having a bit more structure. Let's say that this is our monthly target. Okay, now monthly target. So in a month you have 4.3 recurring weeks. Okay, so we're going to work on the basis there are 4 weeks in a month. Okay, I appreciate that some weeks you get a little bit more, no problem, but in a 4-week month that's what we're going to operate at. So the common approach, I'm going to put it in red because I don't agree that it works. The common approach is to say, fine, I've got 4 weeks to do 10 grand, therefore I need to do how much? 2.5 per week. Okay, per week. Now, in my experience, and I'm sure there are other people out there who've got more experience than me, but I've done the sales world and sales management, focusing day in, day out for over a decade on making sure I hit revenue targets and building business units around that. And when it comes down to hitting multi-million pound targets across the year, you need to understand that day in, day out, you have to have an understanding of what you need to do. This is setting yourself up for failure. And here's why. Typically, in an average 4-week month, always there is on average 1 week where you screw up a bit. So what you need to do is build in failure. Let's be clear here, this isn't going against the ethos of never give up, make sure you never fail and things like that. This isn't being soft, this is recognizing that stuff happens, and you'll see in a minute that the approach here means you can actually do well and even in fact better than you otherwise would. In failure, what I suggest really simply is your $10,000 target. gets focused across 3 of your 4 weeks. So your target per week is not 2.5k. Your target per week really simply is 3 or 3.3 recurring thousand per week. What it means is that each week, this is the target I need to be trying to achieve. If I achieve this each week, by week 3, I have achieved my 10k. And what I have the week 4 for is either catching up if I'm short, or going through to ideally hit 133% on week 4, because I've got another 3,500. Okay, so expecting failure is a bit of a weird way of putting it, but what I find is that especially when there are lots of people and then different things happen, you know, we had Labor Day this Monday in the US, and you know, one of my clients obviously took a massive hit in their US business. That's where they do probably 60% of their revenue. What it means is that you have to recognize that stuff happens. What about when you get ill? What about if your best guy leaves or something like that? So understanding that if you work in a 3-week process instead of 4 week, you get a lot more out of it. Okay, so just to be clear, your target, okay, is divided by 3 weeks, and a 4th week is for a bonus. Okay, it won't necessarily be that you hit it in 3 weeks. It might be in week 1 you do 3.5 grand, week 2 you do 2 grand, and so you're a bit behind. Week 3 you do 1 grand, so then week 4 you've got to catch up a bit. Or you do 6 in the first week, then you do 0 the next week because you've shoved it all into the first week. Do you see what I mean? So the key here is to understand that you need to build in a little bit of extra, you know, a little bit of buffer. If you aim for 4 weeks, when the 4 weeks is all you've got, you'll never do it. You always fail, okay? And across a year, it's more apparent. The biggest mistake I see is when people say, I've got £1 million target or $1 million target in a year. They divide it by the number of weeks or the number of months, so that's what we have to do each month. It's a huge mistake, huge mistake. What about if your business is affected by the summer months? What about if your business is affected by Christmas? Is anyone taking time off? Do you see what I mean? So all these things will come into play. You need to always make sure you take a bit of extra time, okay? So how does this affect us on a weekly basis? Okay, well, we're going to work in the same way. So our weekly target is 3,300 or 3,300 or whatever you want to call it, 3.3k per week. Okay, if we do it every week for 4 weeks, good for us. But at the very least, we know we've got 1 week to screw up. The mistake people also make within a week is that they operate, let's say you work on the basis you work 5 days a week. I know a lot of you don't, okay? But working on the basis you have 5 days in a week, the mistake is the same. The mistake is, well, it's 5 days, so I have to divide that by 5. Okay, so that's what I have to do in a week. What's that? $660 dollars per day. Am I right? I think I'm right. Okay, so if I do that in every single day, I'll be fine and I'll hit 3.3 a week. It's the same problem. Instead of this approach, you should be thinking, I have a 4-day week. Okay? When you work 5 days. The 5th day, a CEO I once worked with put it perfectly. He said, the 5th day is for mopping up. Okay? He said, Richard, the last thing you need is to be coming on a Friday, knowing you've got your weekend and you've 1 day to do it. Done something really interesting. I hate this term, hump day. Seriously, people talk about hump day like we're over the hill now, we're on the way down to the weekend. Get that out of your vocabulary. Seriously, I see it a lot. Sales managers kill that kind of idea that you're on the way down to the weekend now. It's a really bad idea, because what you're doing is you're creating this environment where people are living for not being at work. You should be making an environment people want to work in, okay? So hump days are a bad call, because what you're saying is we're on our way out of here soon. Hang in there, there, guys, not much longer doing something you don't want to do. So get rid of that terminology, okay? But Wednesday, okay, is currently midweek. Oh, midweek. I want you to change the attitude as well. Where I won big was when I made Tuesday. And look, this is habitual. It takes time for people to get used to this. But when you make Tuesday midweek, so I have a 4-day week. I have Monday and Tuesday, then I have Wednesday and Thursday, then my week is finished. I have Friday for mopping up. It's a really simple process, and you might think it's a bit strange, but it recognizes that we're fallible and things can go wrong. And if things go wrong, you need to be able to work with it. Okay? You can't expect, think about it this way, now I'm hopefully convincing you that you can't expect every single day and every single week and every single month and year to go perfectly. Okay? So don't set yourself all of your time to do all of your target. You need a buffer, and it's something that's missed out a huge amount. So here's what I would do. I'd be saying, right, in the week, my target's 3.5K per week. So what I need to be doing is half of that by Tuesday, end of day, and the second half by Thursday, end of day. Friday, therefore, is basically bonus time, or Friday, of course, is where I'm catching up. But what it means is at the end of the day on Thursday, I'm working on the basis it's the end of my world, that's the end of it, I'm out of time. And it creates this urgency that naturally you don't have on Monday and Tuesday, because typically on Monday and Tuesday, people feel like they're at the top of the week, and it's this relaxed atmosphere. Whereas on a Tuesday, if you start thinking to yourself, right, we're halfway through the week at the end of today, so where are we on the target? Okay, so this then needs to be, what would it be? 1.6, whatever it is. Call it 1.7 or thereabouts. $1,700 per week. So in the first 2 days is what you need to be doing. Okay, well, that's my target. By a halfway point on Tuesday, I need to be on $1,700. It means that I have myself naturalized to hitting the rest of the target by the Thursday. If anything happens on Friday, great. If you're running an incentive, you can kick up the start and find out when sunshine. But the point is, the Friday or the 4th week in the month, both of those are used to exceed target. The problem is, what happens, I suppose, in sales these days, unless you're absolutely flying, is that you hit it, or of course you exceed it. Now, what I find is that most people miss it because they take the traditional approach I suggested, where you have 4 weeks and you try and do it in 4 weeks. That's where you miss it. At best, people hit it then because they get a bit of luck. But the whole point of a target isn't to ever try and meet it, is to go through it. Okay? You'll start conducting incentives, okay, for if you do what's called a stretch. I can't spell it. So that might be, for instance, if my team does 120% of the target, then they get a bonus or something like that. Or the money that we make on that Friday, if we achieve it by the Thursday, we don't divide it up and give it out, or whatever it might be. But this is the way to move ahead. And, when it comes to making sure you get early traction as a startup, you have to operate like this. And when you have, for instance, if your target is 10,000 and then you find you need to do 15 because of more overheads or because you're going to try and grow your business, there's logic in also asking yourself for more as well. So this is a good approach. If this is your target, what I've described so far is a good approach. But what is also an even more effective approach, instead of dividing your target by 3 weeks out of 4, and instead of dividing your target by 4 days in 5 in a week, what you do is you add a bit more. So this is the secret. This is what made me very successful with hitting targets with my team and exceeding them. So what I did was, if I was assigned a target, I would never tell my team what the target actually was as well. If I was assigned a $10,000 target, for instance, I would make my target, say, 12,000, okay? Then I divide that by the 3 weeks. So I would need to do, 4,000 per week. That would now be my target, okay? What's actually happening is if I'm doing £4,000 a week, by the second week, if I'm on point, I've done 8 of my 10 already, but you're naturalizing yourself to always being slightly above it. Because if you aim up here, you may hit down here, okay? So you're aiming higher up at all times. So always be naturalized to a higher level. So this was the crucial thing, is pushing yourself and saying to yourself every day, what needs to happen to be doing this kind of money? 4K a week equals 1,000 per day. Because I'm working on a 4-day week, remember, instead of 5. So every day I have to do 1,000. And 1,000 a day, think about it, I have a 20-day month if I'm working to 5-day weeks or across a 4-week month to do this 10K. I'm going to be smashing that. But it may be that feels like a big stretch for you, but that's what you have to get used to doing. You have to get used to focusing on a target that may feel a little bit above your station, but you get used to it, okay? And, you know, I'm not going to go touchy-feely, and I'm absolutely not a life coach or anything like that, and my focus isn't typically motivation, but what you do is understand that any target can be hit, but sometimes you just have to apply yourself more, you have to be more creative, maybe you need more staff for it. Whatever it might be, it is always possible to do, you just need to do something maybe slightly different to what you've been doing so far. You know, I was speaking to someone only a few days ago, and he's complaining about how it's really hard to get his target's too high. And you know, I said, well, when did you leave the office? And he said, well, I left the office at 6 last night, so I stayed a bit later. And I'm like, that's not late, you know. If you really wanted to hit the target, you stay a bit later, as in 7 or 8 or however long it takes to hit the target. If you want to go home at 6 because you want to sit and watch telly or whatever it is, then don't complain about not hitting target. Okay, so if you want to do all these things that are, you know, superfluous to hitting your targets and doing things that you're saying are important to you that, you know, they arguably aren't, then, well, then don't complain if you don't hit target. So it's like I said, I'm not a motivational speaker so much, but I do feel that sometimes you just need to step it up a bit. But focusing like this on hitting your target when your target is an artificial one that's slightly higher, this is what I would share with the team, okay? If I'm working for myself, that's just the number I have to tell myself over and over again. Richard, it's 12 grand, okay? It's not 10. Deep down at the back of my mind, I know I can get away with 10. I know that's like my soft target. No, it's 12. And you say it week in, week out, and you end up getting used to that actually being the target. Share that with the team. They're like, wow, okay. And I remember this happening. I remember it going up for one of our teams once, you know, to a higher level. And the manager saying to me, this was where I kind of learnt the technique, he was like, you just have to get used to that being what you do. And if you get it right, you end up in a point where you are always ahead, or worst case, you tend to find you are dead on target. But you typically don't find that you are 2 to 3 weeks into a month, you're sliding fast and you now got no time to hit it. If you don't build in contingency, you better rely on a lot of luck. Simple as that, okay? If you don't build in contingency, you've got to rely on loads of luck, and you can't sustain that across a whole year, okay? I'll keep it nice and simple. Just see if there's any questions here. Carolina, thank you very much for sharing, and Peter, thanks for joining as well. Basically, that's the point. It's as simple as that, okay? I think it's nice and clear. I wanted to keep it simple today, rather than doing a Q&A, although if anyone has any questions, of course, I'll always answer them. But hopefully that makes sense to you. Divide your target by less weeks than you actually have. Divide your target weekly by less days than you actually have. That way you have redundancy built in. What I found was that worst case, I was always hitting target. I was meeting it, but it's because I was stretching for somewhere further, okay? I was trying to go further than the actual target. And it meant that my poor performance was still this. It was more than adequate because I was doing what I was being asked to do, okay? If you're assigned a target by a business, then that's what it is expected by you, from you. It's not a major achievement, is the way you should look at it, by hitting your target. It's your job. There shouldn't be celebrations if you hit a target. It's your job. That's what you're meant to be doing. $1 less than 10,000, if that's my target, actually means that I've been underperforming. It's nothing to celebrate. $10,000 is I've turned up and I've done my job. Therefore, you should be aiming for more. This is the technique to do it. It's sustainable and it's scalable, and across a year, that's how you will move to much higher levels, and that's how you'll find that you end up, you know, smashing targets, and that's where your $1 million businesses are made, okay? Always stretching a bit more every year, pushing yourself a little bit higher, but these little techniques are things you have to make a habit of. And it might take a couple of months to get used to it, but this is what worked for me. Okay, I'm going to finish up there. If it looks like I might have a question, thank you very much. I'll leave it actually at that. But look, hope that helps, and I'll speak to you again really soon.